Perfect. Yeah, I think we're live. See. There's like a 10-second delay between what we do on Zoom and what people see on YouTube, so you know. Perfect, we're live. All right. Welcome everybody to the first Breathwork Summit 2025. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Mahesh. I'm going to be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. I'm from India. I live in Sweden usually, but right now I'm in Bali with my whole family. We sort of migrate for the winter. So we are here. It's raining and I'm going to be outside and make you all jealous by showing you a beautiful background. But no, I'm sitting in my kitchen because it's raining so much. But I'm really excited to be here with you. Just a quick introduction on myself. I've been working in the intersection with a company called FastPass. I've been working in the field of health and tech. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. We take about 25,000 breaths per day. And 90% of us breathe, have a breathing dysfunction 90% of the time. This manifested for me when I'm sure many of you have high performing jobs, and many of you have stressful careers, need to be really alert. And for me, it was many years ago, and I realized that I kept getting winded. I just didn't have enough performance. And leading me into like, I'm going to be short, so Aaron, thanks for that. Hopefully, it's not too bad in terms of quality. All right, so I'm freezing as well, which is weird. People on YouTube seem to be fine. Maybe it's a Zoom thing. Let's see. I'm just going to pause. Okay, I hope it gets better. So anyway, this is when I realized that I really needed to get my breathing going, and I had all these issues while training, so poor recovery, anxiety before game, lack of focus, breathlessness, and it sort of manifested in my martial arts with Thai boxing coach, sort of teaching me some very basic breathing techniques, and it went to a whole new level when my wife, that you see in the photo here to the left, had pelvic floor dysfunction. The power of breathwork in a much more detailed manner. So I'm really excited to sort of bring this all together. When I read James Nestor's book and realized we need to bring more people together to start talking about it. So the Breathwork Summit is literally our first attempt at bringing different experts and to really raise the awareness and raise the conversation about how we can breathe, what are different aspects of breathworks, how can we apply it in our daily life. So what we've done, we've also created a simple assessment to get your own breathing score. This was very useful for me when I started training. So if you're not sure how your breathing is today, or if you're not sure if you're breathing well, or if you're unsure, what you need to do, this is a great start. I'll leave it here, and I'll also make sure you get in the email for those watching on your phone or on the run. So you have sort of a baseline, how your breathing is. So that's a little bit of an introduction. Let's get started with the real experts in the room. The panel is very simple, or the format is very simple. Every speaker that you get gets about 5 to 7 minutes. I'm saying 5 minutes because we all have a tendency to speak a little bit more. So let's say 5 to 7 minutes and come somewhere there. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. And if you don't have any specific questions, you can write comments in the chat, and we'll make sure that we pick it up, discuss it. So I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker, and that's none other than my good friend Johnny Oduya. He's an NHL champion. He's a pioneer. He's the founder of Hale Center here in Stockholm, or in Sweden. I'm not there right now, but they do lovely work. The privilege of speaking to him a couple of times. So without any further ado, Johnny, take it away.
Right, beautiful. Thank you very much for having me to start with. It's a late night here in Stockholm, but talking about breath, I can do that in the middle of my sleep, I think. So really nice to hang out with you guys. And I was thinking about what am I supposed to talk about here? I only have 5 minutes, and I think in some ways, my journey into this could be an interesting starting point, and it was very similar to what you were talking about. Also, of course, I've been a professional athlete for a very long time, and had a feeling and an idea quite early that I wanted to be in good shape for all the good reasons, and was always working hard and always, wanted to be on top of my game. The reason why I then got interested for breathing, I think I was always interested in holistic wellness. I was quite early starting to, measuring my different, sleep scores or recovery and all these things that are quite modern nowadays. And breath was the first time I kind of got in contact with that was in the yoga community, maybe 25 years ago or something like that. Started to play around with breathing more around 10 years ago. I found it very confusing. It was very difficult to, especially find the implementation for athleticism. And it was quite abstract also, I felt at that time. With some people, especially in the US, I know we're a little bit earlier there than we are in Europe and especially in Sweden. But still had a tough time and trying to understand how do I grasp and like get my hands around what this actually is. And it wasn't until I actually stopped playing that I dove down even deeper into these different type of modalities. So very similar to what you were just sharing there earlier. I think a lot of us come into this kind of world of breathing with some ideas, but probably not that many ideas around breathing at all. It was very new to me, and I was excited that it was also new. So starting to play around with that, I think the last 6 years, what I've been trying to do, of course, is working with athletes. And the first step, I think, would be for them to realize that there's something there to start with, that they have this kind of mini superpower inside of them, and see if they can approach maybe the way that their body is handling load, how their mind obviously is going through these type of challenges, and how they can progress through that. So if I then think about the individuals that I've worked with for the last, almost I would say 5 years now, and really trying to have this kind of athletic perspective, I'm not a scientist. I don't come from the medical community. I'm not really from, I would say the abstract or the spiritual part of breathing either, but I really come from this as an athlete and with that mindset. And for me, it's very important to try and test things, which I like to do, and I'm usually quite early with that, but also see what's actually is working. And I think the biggest takeaways and keys that I ran upon is the understanding of the habitual nature or what the breathing is doing to you. So to very concretely, I had a athlete a few years ago, a soccer player, and every time he was going to do sprints in practice, and the end of the practice, his legs just gave out, and he became quite anxious around what he was going to do. And usually when I work with them, I'm also trying to incorporate that kind of mental part of it as well, and see if they can start to observe if they're doing something or not with the breath. And in that case, we figured out that we were doing simulations and we were working even in a different space, then we will see the response in him. And it's almost like he can acknowledge that his breathing is shifting and he becomes more anxious just implementing that and thinking about it. So for him, it was super, super interesting to acknowledge that and see, when he's on the field, what is happening, how is his mind shifting, and is the breath actually doing something? And just by kind of starting observing that pattern, he then realized that, oh, I am actually controlling, I am doing something. And then he can work with kind of releasing that or not going into that. So it wasn't actually so much enforcing this specific technique. It was more for him to bring fundamental understanding of that the breathing actually is impacting him. And I think that is kind of a basis for a lot of the work that I do. I had one lady in my class also the other day that had very similar. She was in a bicycle accident, and now we're doing stuff on the bike, and she's like really panicking, right? We're trying to work with breath holds or anything, and it was really strong emotions connected to that. So I think the first part for somebody that are going into any type of performance exercise, that start to acknowledge what the breath is doing, and then of course then you can start to work with mechanics or specific like breath patterns as well. But I would say that's the biggest learning for me the last couple of years. Yeah.
Beautiful, Johnny. You have a stellar career as an NHL winning, as like one of the top NHL athletes in the world. And obviously to have you, flying the flag of breathing is super exciting. So I'm really excited to dive deep towards the end with some more questions, Q&A on your own personal usage. And of course, as a practitioner today. Let's give it up. Thank you, Johnny. Let's give it up for Trista Zinn, who is my partner in crime here behind this event. And she's also the reason I got really excited about Breathworks, because she's one of the founders of, or one of the instructors of Hyperpressives. And Hyperpressives has been revolutionary for my wife, and now for the last 18 months for me in terms of my own performance. So Trista, without any further ado, take it away.
You're on mute.
That helps. So I will try to keep it in a little bit of a nutshell here. But I do think my personal journey is a little bit important to my story on how I got into breath work. Interestingly enough, it was a discovery of pelvic floor dysfunction that actually led me in the direction of respiratory training. And I'm a personal trainer, was my background. I came from the fitness industry, and I had been diagnosed with pelvic organ prolapse, so stage 2. And I'd found this hypopressive technique that was based out of Europe, predominantly in Spain. I'm really keeping this short. I went to the level 1 course. I was able to take the course as a trainer. What I learned in that course was like groundbreaking. I'd never heard of anybody in all the fitness workshops, courses, conferences that I'd taken, nobody ever talked about the respiratory diaphragm in relation to core and core function. It just wasn't being talked about in North America at the time. And then, of course, how it related to the core, the pelvic floor, etc. The exercise technique restored my pelvic health, and I no longer have the pelvic organ prolapse, and it became like a whirlwind of travel back and forth to get myself to become master trainer of this hypopressive practice and course instructor. So it is my passion. It is what I do. I teach the courses to professionals. I see clients one-to-one, and it is a postural and respiratory program, re-education, but also a maintenance program, because you can't just expect to do breath work for 12 weeks or strengthen the body for 12 weeks and expect it's going to stay for the rest of your life. There's definitely maintenance involved. And it's really taken me further. I am a cyclist, runner, cross-country skier, lover of all things fitness and outdoors. And when I started this hypopressive practice, there was definitely a moment where when I went out for my run, I was like, oh my God, it like actually felt like I could breathe again. Like I had not breathed before on my runs that I noticed before. So that was definitely an eye opener. Working with clients more and more with this exercise technique, where we do some lateral costal breathing. We're really looking at the movement of the rib cage, the respiratory diaphragm as it relates to the core as a whole. You know that you can't just train one piece of the core at a time, that everything from head to toe to the fingertips is going to affect its ability to function as a unit synergistically. So it's very much a full body approach to core and pelvic health. So I had to really take a step back, take a look at my clients' current breathing patterns, listen to them talk, see what their emotions were like around the symptoms that they were coming to me with, whether it was low back pain or pelvic floor dysfunction or respiratory problems, and kind of go deeper than what the hypopressive technique itself offered, because I needed to fine tune some breathing patterns first and then slowly introduce this hypopressive practice. So I've been working with women and men since 2012, restoring respiratory function, postural work with this hypopressive technique. And the athletes, I'd see the odd athlete come in, and as I noticed a difference, they also noticed a difference in their performance. And then it wasn't, I guess it was early in 2023, or maybe late 2023. My son, who is now 18, almost 19, was listening to something about this flow state. He's a basketball player, a high-level basketball player. And I heard him listening to talking about this flow state and trying to find this flow state in his game. And I was like, what is this you're listening to? And so I did a search and Googled it. And I was like, oh my God, this is all like really breath related. And what you're trying to achieve on the court, I can help you get there. I can help you get there with this breath practice and breathing practice, and help you improve your endurance and your sports performance, where you can just play the game and not become breathless, right? And just enjoy the game and the game for what it was. And so without becoming, well, as you know, if your diaphragm starts to fatigue, which apparently 50% of athletes suffer from diaphragm fatigue, automatically it starts to pull blood from the legs, and they feel the legs fatigue. And just in that in itself is going to throw your game off, right? Your mental game is going to be shot, because now you're feeling fatigued, you're breathless, you're not going to have the focus, you're not going to be able to stay in the flow. So with this respiratory training and this breath work that I do, I have helped him, and I've now been training his team. I've also been training a boxer, some other athletes, help achieve their flow state and help improve their overall endurance, reduce breathlessness, and really help them, gain focus and clarity when they're playing the game. So for me, it's really excited. It's just taken me down this whole other avenue, whereas before it was a little more pelvic floor centric based on my own perspective, how I brought it to North America, but now it's taken off a whole new direction. Yes, and I think my time is probably up, but that's where I come
Yeah.
from. I'm looking at.
No, it's exciting how we all come towards similar places from different starting points, and that's really what this panel embodies. So Trista, your journey is very inspiring to reverse health challenge. I know how hard that is, seeing it sort of first or second hand, very close quarters, and now to transition into performance is really exciting. Thank you, Trista. Now I'd like to give the stage to Erin Dahlgren. Erin is actually, I met her because she's my neighbor, or she was my neighbor. She moved to Miami with her lovely family, and I moved to Bali because we just prefer the warmth, I guess, amongst other things. And Erin was the one that introduced me to Johnny. So thank you for that, Erin. And most importantly, Erin, you're the one that we started talking about this many, many years ago. So I'm really excited that it's sort of come to a crescendo here today. So Erin, without any further ado, take it away.
Thank you. Excited to be here. My name's Erin, as you heard, and I come from a performing background. I'm a singer. I'm a certified breath guide with Hale Center in Stockholm. I'm a master teaching artist, and I am the founder of Engage Breathwork. And there are so many amazing speakers here today. I have to admit, I'm feeling a little nervous and a little like almost imposter syndrome at being in this incredible lineup. And we've already heard some pretty fascinating and intriguing ways in which breathwork can help with general life and stress management, anxiety, performance related in particular. But there was just this one thought that kept coming into my mind when it came to thinking about what I was going to present today. And that is a question that I keep coming back to in my own practice and in my own work as a breath guide. And that is, what if we didn't have any of these dysfunctions to unlearn? what if instead we grew up with the knowledge of being able to access these tools and techniques and breathing, using breath work and breathing to be able to increase our performance, yes, but also regulate our bodies, regulate our nervous systems, our emotions. And what if we introduce those at a much earlier age? Now, among the guests here, how many of you came to breathing techniques and breath work as an adult? I just heard two amazing stories with Johnny and Trista. Yes. So I myself also came to breath work as an adult, but as a singer, I started training around age 13, and the training was quite technical as a classical singer. So we worked a lot with strengthening the diaphragm. Interestingly, with Johnny, I managed to identify that was around the time that my asthma symptoms disappeared. So that definitely had an impact. But I've started noticing that many of the people that come to me recently are even younger than that. I'm working with kids as young as 6 years old, all the way through teenagers who are dealing with sometimes debilitating anxiety. And I'm having concerned parents, teachers, pediatric healthcare professionals actually reach out to me and say, can you help these kids to figure out how to use their breath to find calm and find regulation? So it's something that I thought we would bring in because it seems to be increasing. I know I have two daughters myself who are aged 8 and 11. We use breath work at home, sometimes more than others, but in a post-COVID world, we're seeing anxiety in kids just skyrocket. And there are so many stresses, I think we can all agree, many of which we didn't have to deal with as kids when we think about social media and screen time, in addition to academic pressures, competitive sports and things. There's a lot that these kids are dealing with. Self-regulation is linked to empathy, conscience development, social competence, emotional well-being, academic success, so many things. And a lack of self-regulation, a lack of these self-regulating tools lead to things like disruptive behaviors, higher rates of exclusion by peers, difficulties managing stress, as well as high risk for addictions and substance abuse and law breaking as an adult. So these are some of the things that are coming through in recent studies. I have the assumption that most of the people here today, not just in this space, but watching, are here because they're starting to recognize the benefits, the health benefits that breathing has, and understand that it's one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal for regulation and stress management. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important to start to bring these in at a really young age is because kids in particular, and teenagers especially, are so predominantly driven by these big emotions, these powerful emotions, and yet they have the complete inability to regulate themselves. In fact, I would say that I know many adults who have the complete inability to regulate themselves because so many of us, we were just not taught those skills as kids. And it's not enough to just say, take a deep breath. Just breathe. It's fine. In the middle of an anxiety attack or a tantrum, if you've ever experienced anxiety attacks, I know I have, if someone tells you to breathe, you're likely to just punch them in the face. It's not helpful. What we need to be doing instead is introducing some techniques in moments of calm so that kids start to associate breathing in certain ways with feeling calm, with feeling in control, and then can come back to those techniques in times of high anxiety and stress and know that it's going to disrupt the body's response to whatever stimulus is coming at them, both physically and emotionally. And I think that that's one of the most powerful gifts that we can give the next generation. Now, I realize I'm speaking very quickly, but as a teaching artist, I've been teaching in schools and working with everything from early childhood through teenagers and adults. But I've been developing programs to come into schools and work with teachers in particular on introducing these techniques into classrooms. And the results so far have been amazing. It's a beautiful thing to see an aha moment in a teacher when they realize that just 2 minutes of sitting and accessing the breath not only helps them and their own state of regulation, but actually has an impact on the kids, on their behaviors, on their focus, on their academic success. And that's been really beautiful to watch. But I know that there are a lot of guides in particular that have perhaps not worked so much with kids. So I thought I would bring in a couple of ideas about how to adapt some of the techniques that we all know work really well to kids. And many of them are, I think, fairly obvious. Just things like keeping it really engaging, using storytelling, bringing in different types of animals. How do animals breathe? I think we can all agree that lower abdominal breathing is something that many people don't access. And so placing a favorite toy or book on the belly and lying down and seeing if you can make it rise and fall with your breath. It's as simple as a minute like that. In transitions in classrooms or at home, I'd like to share, if I can, a couple of fun little exercises. I have a million of these. There's a lot of stuff out there on the internet on how to do this. But starfish breathing, simple and quick. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Working your way around the fingers as you go. Another one of my favorites is, do you have a flower? Show me your flower. Let's smell the flower. And let's blow out the candle. I use this one with my daughter. Sometimes we actually light a candle and make the flame just dance slightly without letting it go out. And it immediately brings us back to focus and calm when we're feeling a little dysregulated. So co-regulation is important. I'm going to finish up here because I could talk all day about how to bring these techniques into kids' lives. But if there are any parents or coaches that want to look at doing this, I have a couple of upcoming workshops, both workshops for breathwork for kids, working with kids, and also a workshop for guides, breath guides, who are looking to adapt these breathing techniques for kids. So let me know if anyone wants to know more about that. And Mahesh will be able to give you the details. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. What a wonderful story of focusing on kids. And I mean, you hit the head on the nail by asking us, how many of us got into this as adults versus kids, and what if we start working with kids from early. So well done taking that mantle up. So the next one that we're going to have, the penultimate one, is Diane Lee. Diane, you have a very different perspective. I'm loving all these different perspectives, from sports to pelvic organ prolapse to kids. Now you're going to dazzle us. So Diane, take it away. I hope you can share your screen. Perfect. I see that you're already on it. So take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very
You're
much.
on mute,
Well, we're off to a really great start.
Yeah.
Breathing is a really, really complex topic that I think all of us could talk about for days and days and days. And I wanted to kind of cut to a chase to a recent passion of mine. So breathing is not only essential for life and death, but for the quality of life. And that's the thing we've been hearing for over the last half hour. So it oxygenates the body. And when you breathe out or you cough or sneeze, it helps to eliminate waste. Trista mentioned how important the diaphragm is for postural control of the trunk. And I think this is something that Johnny was alluding to in terms of how we can use breathing and different breathing strategies to generate pressure for control of the trunk, and also fascial mechanisms with different forms of breathing for feeling stronger, faster, better. And Erin has mentioned how important breathing and certain patterns of breathing are for regulation of the nervous system and for stress. Now, the system or the mechanism that I'm really into these days is the movement of fluid, and how breathing acts as a pump, and the movement of the blood in our arteries and veins, and also the lymphatic system. So when we look at the amount of fluid that moves through our body in a day, the numbers are staggering. So 4.5 to 6 liters of blood, 10 to 15 liters of interstitial fluid. That's the fluid in between all your cells that has to move and get nutrients to the cells and waste products out of the body. And here's where the lymphatic system plays a huge role, because the cells in the lymph are part of our immune system. So these are the cells that are looking for the radical cells that cause cancer, the bacteria and viruses that make us sick, all of the things that make us feel well or not. So for tissues to function well, Drainage precedes supply. And this is something that was at the foundation of osteopathy by Andrew Taylor Still. Perry Nicholson is all and on about drainage precedes supply. And I was introduced to this work by associate in my clinic, Judith Orban. So only after we clear the waste products in our body can the body receive, use, and distribute nutrients, oxygen, and the other substances we need to perform. And if our drainage systems are congested or blocked, it can inhibit the impact of any treatment, no matter what it is: chiropractic, massage, physiotherapy, supplements, gut health. It impacts it all because the tissues become overwhelmed by the toxins that are in the waste products. So by addressing drainage first, you create a very clean and receptive environment where healing and regeneration of tissues can happen. So these systems, the lymphatic and the glymphatic system, which is the drainage in your brain, drain waste and must not be blocked. So what are the symptoms? How do you know that you've got blocked pipes, that this system's not draining well? Anything and everything. So morning stiffness is a symptom of having poor lymphatic drainage at night. Pain anywhere, literally anywhere. Chronic fatigue, bloating, gut issues, swelling. So my practice is not with the athletic population. I deal with your neighbor, the person down the street, and a lot of aging folks. And the older we get, the more toxic and waste hanging onto we get. And these people like to be active as well. Brain fog, memory loss, cognitive impairments, poor sleep, poor healing of anything, poor immune function, which ultimately leads to pathology and disease. So what improves the drainage of these toxins? Breathing, because of its action as a pump, and movement. So optimal breathing requires that you have a mobile thorax, and Trista's mentioned this already. So in the video you see running on the left, we see that big organ on the bottom, which is your liver, which is attached through the diaphragm to the heart. And as we breathe in and the diaphragm descends, if it can, it pulls down on the liver pushes down, the central tendon of the diaphragm, the pericardium of the heart gets stretched. And this helps to change the pressures between the thorax and the abdomen. So these changing pressures between the thorax and the abdomen is what moves the fluid, because fluid moves from a high pressure environment to a low pressure environment. And the lowest pressure environment is in your lungs. So everything is about getting the fluid back through the lymphatic system to the lungs, to the kidneys, to the areas where we excrete fluid. So during inhalation, your rib cage should be able to widen from side to side, from front to back. And the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, as you know, descend on the inhale breath and ascend on the exhale breath. And it is really common to have restrictions of not just your whole thorax, but like one of those circles of rings, what we call a thoracic ring. If you have muscle imbalance between your abdominal wall and your back muscles, and it can create like a tourniquet on the thorax, so that when you take a breath in, instead of the rib cage expanding, it gets twisted and it rotates. So you get poor oxygenation, you get poor elimination of wastes, and the pump isn't very effective, okay? The other thing that's common when we don't train our core is that the thorax starts to descend onto the top of the pelvis. We get compression, right? We don't have a bone in the front of us that holds us up. So the ribs come together like a slinky. And so the more the rib cage gets compressed, again, the less it's able to expand, the less it's able to do all the things it needs to do, which is why when I took the level 1 hypopressive course from Trista, what I remember the most about that course is grow long and longer, longer. And she's absolutely right, because until we can get that thorax open and separated and unwound, you'll never get the breath that you need to regulate your nervous system and to act like a pump, okay? So this reduced chest expansion and this tourniquet on our rib cage when we're breathing reduces the amplitude of the pump. Fluid starts to stagnate and toxicity begins. So if you want to put your hands on your own rib cage anywhere, take a breath in. You should feel it widen from side to side. But if you really pay attention to the individual ribs, you may find that there's an area in your thorax which doesn't expand well, where you actually feel when you breathe in, like what's happening on this slide on the right, your whole rib cage is rotating. And most of us have some rings that are hijacked by neuromuscular vectors or visceral vectors or something else. And to the best of our ability, maintenance is about clearing these and being able to breathe in a good way, okay? So our goal in physiotherapy and in any breath work, if you're working with clients, is to restore optimal breathing and all its functions, which means you have tools in your toolbox to release any restriction, whether it's in the joints, the muscles, the viscera, or fascial, that prevents the ribs from fully rotating posteriorly on the inhale and anteriorly on the exhale. And once we release those restrictions, we can start training various breathing patterns, as you've heard this afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are on the planet. And those can be to optimize the end-tidal CO2, which basically means the carbon dioxide level and in your blood gases. And this is really, really important for anxiety and for just being in, whether you're acidic or alkaline and healing. We use capnometry, which is a machine that measures end-tidal CO2 when you breathe out. And a lot of times people are over breathing for the task that they're in. So this is really important, usually mainly used in physiotherapy. Breathing for a loading assist. So a deadlift, a lift of a heavy block. Whether you exert fully on the exhale or the inhale, doesn't matter, whatever's best for you. But one uses an intra-abdominal pressure strategy, the other fascial loading. And the type of breathing that Trista uses now that helped cure or restore her pelvic organ prolapse would be one that did not use a pressure strategy, but used one of a fascial loading strategy. And that's all about how you use your diaphragm. Thirdly, and Erin's mentioned this, using breathing techniques to regulate the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems for calming it. And lastly, moving fluids. So you want to drain first with lymphatic and cranial techniques if they're in your toolbox, and then use a full diaphragmatic breath after you've released the thoracic rings. A hypopressive breathing pattern is excellent for this. Drain that fluid every single day, maintain it, and then go for a walk, run, swim, just move. Okay? Think about the lymphatics. That's my message.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan. I have so many questions. What a wonderful angle of sort of combining the medical perspective and the well-being perspective. So really exciting. I have so many questions, but we'll come back to that. The last speaker for the day before we open up for Q&A is Taylor. Taylor has the distinction of being my first podcast guest, and he's a sports performance coach. And he has a very different perspective, as you can imagine now, which is the theme of our panel. So Taylor, last but not the least, please take it away.
Thank you, Mahesh. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is a great panel with, a lot of different ways of looking at breathing, and I love this. So just a little bit of my background. It seems we obviously all came to breathing in many different ways. Before I got into breath work, I was actually in the financial industry, worked on a trading floor, very high stress environment, found the techniques to help me personally. And this was about 2014, and started really diving into the science, went down the rabbit hole, and quit my job in 2017, started my company Symmetry, and I'm a XPT certified master coach, a certified breath science practitioner, and use breath stress management, really focus on sleep as well with clients from executives to athletes. And we look at breath, what we call the 5 pillars of breath. And so when we're working with clients, we're really looking, the first thing is, how are they breathing every day? We're looking at breathing through your nose, breathing lower, and breathing slower. And what we see so often with whether it's individuals and the executive, C-suites, or with athletes, a lot of people are moving around throughout their day when they're at rest, breathing in and out of their mouth, over breathing, like Diane mentioned, and causing a lot of issues on how your body's just going to be able to use oxygen, regulate your stress environment. And so that's really one of the first areas we focus on, doing assessments and testing with clients, and really trying to repattern their breath mechanics, and also how you're able to use CO2 and that tolerance to air hunger, we call it, and deal with that rising CO2 so you can handle stress a little bit better. From there, we work into a lot of grounding techniques. See a lot of breath work in this day and age, which is much more intense, very fast pace, high, a lot of breath rate, very big breaths, and see a lot of people who come and they've done a lot of that work. So we tend to take them the other way. They're already very high stress, maybe tipping over onto that level of potentially burnout. So we're doing a lot of things just to slow that breath down. And we work on just, at first, not trying to add too much and using what we call just transitions in your day, whether it's a minute here after a meeting, if you're doing Zooms or with clients, or traveling to and from work, can you use that time to check into your breath? Notice, hey, are you breathing into your upper chest? Are you feeling a little bit triggered? Can you just slow it down? There we use a lot of more exhale focused breath techniques because they are much more calming to the nervous system. Then we use techniques that are more activating as well, kind of ramp you up, give you a boost of energy if you need it. Kind of playing into that sympathetic side of the nervous system. So we look at that everyday breathing, grounding, activating. And then once we, know somebody can handle it, their anxiety level's been under control, we start to bring in more stress resilience, breath holding techniques that free divers use, CO2 tables, O2 tables, things along those lines, which, the body's number one goal is respiration. So when you begin to hold your breath, you can really start to understand your stress triggers and learn how to lean into them and not let them overwhelm you. Kind of, because performance in life is done in chaos. But if you can practice that chaos before it comes, you'll be able to handle it a little bit better. So really focus on dealing with stress outside of the actual stressful environment and find that breath holds are a great way to do that. We're also big on using things like saunas and ice baths as well to kind of help on those areas as well. And then the other final area that we look at is what we call transformational breathing, which is much more upregulating, downregulating the nervous system, kind of longer breath sessions. And when we're working at clients, we really like to start at that base and that foundation, though, and in how you're breathing every day. You could dive into the science and, get into the nitty gritty. Everybody on this panel is already kind of given a lot of information there. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit about my background, how I looked at it, and then figured it'd be great for Mahesh to go with the questions. I feel like everybody's covered.
Yeah, thank you,
a lot of what I
Taylor.
would talk
Really
about.
appreciate you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining. I know you had to rejuggle to be here. So thank you. Really appreciate it. I mean,
Thanks for
what an
having me.
interesting, diverse, set of angles to get into the same goal, which is how do we optimize performance? How do we optimize well-being? So I've gotten a few questions over email from people that have not been able to join us live, and I'm going to fire them. So I hope everybody can see, all the speakers here on YouTube. So a couple of questions that are targeted, a couple of questions that are a little bit more open. Let me start with some more open-ended questions. So the first question is, what do you think, why is breathing underutilized today, especially in the context of professional sports and performance? So you can all go around and try to answer that question on why is breathing underutilized. I think this is a coach that's been training his football team. So that's the context. So let's get started there. Who wants to go first? Johnny,
I'll go ahead
you want
and
to go
start.
first?
I think it's underutilized because most people look at breathing as something that we automatically do, and we should all be able to do it. And that it shouldn't be something trained. And I would say until the last, really since COVID, it's been more popularized in books like James Nestor's, which I know you spoke about at the beginning, and things like that coming out and making it more mainstream. But I think it is. I live in Memphis, Tennessee, in the South, and when I started doing this, in 2017, and people were like, what is this stuff? That, like, nobody had ever heard of it. We already know how to breathe. Why do you need to teach me how to breathe? So I think it's something that people just assume everybody knows how to do. And so that's why I would say that most coaches aren't doing it.
So yeah, I'll just add to that.
Yeah.
I think, if it's okay, can I answer also? So I think there's just
Please.
they haven't gotten to that knowledge piece that a lot of times people think with athletes in sports, and I think you mentioned he's a coach. They probably think, okay, breathing is for calm. it's for like more meditative, but they don't understand that actually there is breath work that can help boost athletic performance, and they just don't know how to go about doing it. So if they have heard about it, they just don't know, where am I going with this? How am I supposed to introduce this to the team or to the players? Because they might know or have heard of more of like, okay, how to calm with the breath, but they haven't really learned how to incorporate it for improved athletic performance. And so I think it's just starting to percolate really a little bit. And there's where more athletes are talking about how they're using breath work for this, not only to bring clarity, but also to boost athletic performance. Whether it's looking at the mechanics like Diane Lee's talking about with rib cage movement also, the breath holds, CO2 tolerance, and also like Erin's saying with regards to regulation, you need that too. And I think that the cool thing is when you get into breath work, all of these things start to kind of come into play and overlap each other. And you really need that to have a full body approach or a full perspective when you're introducing breath work. And I think they just don't know how to go about doing it. We need to have more and more tools out there, more and more
I agree.
coaches offering it. Yeah.
And I think there's a perfect segue to the next question is, which I guess is from the same person here, which is how do I get started if I want to implement this? And Trista, maybe you want to answer it briefly, and then we can go around the table and see how should somebody who wants to integrate this as part of their coaching team or in the field of performance get started.
Well, I think from the coach's perspective, they need to reach out to someone who is qualified, who can work with the team and introduce it that way. And so that's what I've done is I've worked it with the basketball team. The coaches are blown away. Like they don't know the information. They don't know actually what happens in the gains that the team can make. But I think what needs to happen is you need to bring someone in who's qualified and to search out either myself, Taylor, Erin, Johnny, Diane. We're all qualified to work with athletes or etc. And see which approach works best for you and bring someone in. Then they'll understand better. Then they'll have cues that they can use then with their team. So with the basketball, I've done workshops and I say to the coach, okay, this is what's supposed to happen in their practice, in their drill. So then when they're doing their warm up before their game, they're already on board and they're already doing that drill with the breath holds, with the nasal breathing, etc. And they have a plan. And then the coach just
I guess that's the question, right? Like, and Johnny, please take space if you have to, since you've done this for yourself, I guess, in your own career and of late, with Hale. Like, how do you get started? Like, obviously, you want to get coaches in, but is it something that you bolt on to your training routine, a warm-up routine, or a cool-down routine, or is this like a separate regimen that you do? What's been your experience that works best from your experience?
Well, first of all, I agree with Trista. Find somebody that can help you. I think is a good idea. But yeah, when I started try to implement things for myself or even with other people, it's like anything else. Is to start. I like to start smaller, and if I can find things. It doesn't matter what type of sport it is. I love to have that conversation with them. I preferably actually go there and just watch what they're doing. And you can watch the way they warm up. You can watch the way they integrate, different exercises. You can watch what they're doing on the cool down. And then I'm just trying to like poke something in there and then start with that and not take them out of a routine. Athletes are very, prone to how do you say the specific behaviors that they like to do before stuff. So it's much easier if somebody has a bad month. It's much easier to introduce breath work than if they're scoring 15 goals and have been doing that for every game. So yeah, superstitious, exactly, that's what it is. So also being very mindful of that I remember, you tie your skates in a certain order and, maybe that's when you kind of implement something, right? So see what they already are doing, I think, or see what you already are doing and if you can implement that. So like Trista said, if there's breath holding, if you want to try that, then maybe you can find that in something that's already there anyways, instead of, trying to reinvent everything. So yeah.
Yeah, the
Beautiful.
cool is the nose is right at the end of your face. So really, you don't have to necessarily always have a specific breathing practice, like you were saying. Incorporate it into what they're doing already. So they don't feel like they have to do extra time in their training. The coach doesn't have to do extra work. You're like, you know what? You're doing those drills already. Let's just change up the way you're doing them. Let's just think about how you're breathing when you're doing them. Let's just go nasal breathing today. Let's try to see if we can work that into the practice. And then, okay, you're still doing that drill. Why don't we now do it with, now add a little bit of a breath hold when you're doing the practice. So they're still going through the same movements, the same patterns, but you're just changing their way they're breathing while they're doing that. So make it as easily accessible as possible, I think, is like so important for these athletes, for anybody. So they don't have to feel it's a whole separate practice necessarily.
I think one of the things that Johnny has highlighted is that breathing is a behavior, and it's an individual behavior, and that what's going to work for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the other. And so you have to observe what they're doing. And what Trista has brought out is just do something different. Change the experience, change how you do it. And the individual's nervous system is going to come back and tell you, especially with breathing, that's better or it's not. Right? And so the fastest way to change behavior in an athlete in particular is to improve their performance. If they have to work at something for a long period of time, they're going to be less willing to change the order they do things, the superstitions, especially if things are going well, right? If things are going not so well, then maybe not. But it's going to be individual, because people think breathing is simple. Everybody who's alive has to, if they do it longer than 4 minutes, they're going to stay alive. If they do it less, can't breathe for 4 minutes, maybe things aren't so good. So we all can breathe, but maybe it's not so optimal. But how we make it optimal is going to be highly individual for those who really need or want to change. There's those who need to change for health, and those who probably should change for better performance. And I think it's two different categories, right?
Different trigger. Beautiful. Well put, Dan. Yeah, I have a question here, which is, would you recommend oxygen chambers? From Dennis. Any experience in the room?
Who would you recommend? Say again?
Would you recommend oxygen chambers? I guess, Dennis, you're referring to like hyperbaric oxygen chambers.
Nothing for me on that one.
No. Anybody else? Because it's funny that you mentioned it. I tried it 3 days ago. So you get into a 95% oxygenated container, or like a capsule, and you're there for like 40 to 50 minutes, and basically you're cleaning out the air. I guess that's what you mean, Dennis. Anybody has any professional experience using that?
I mean, I've used them. It's something that I think it just kind of depends on the person and what they're dealing with. There's definitely some science and research on helping with certain issues. But, just to go use a hyperbaric oxygen chamber occasionally, I think you can get better stuff for less, and that doesn't cost as much. Unless you have like some major issue. There are some things that, you need to be using it every day, like in medical supervision.
Dennis, if you need further, if you want us to go further, just send us a little bit more context on how you're thinking. So we'd be happy to answer it specifically for you. Here's a question for you, Diane. Thank you for this wonderful presentation on the mechanics. I'm a little overweight. How does that affect my ability to breathe better?
So it's a great question. And I guess the question is, where's the weight? Is it on your butt? Is it on your belly, superficial to the abdominal muscles? Is it visceral fat? If you accumulate fat in your visceral system, it's highly pressurizing. I think we've all seen men and women, more men than women, because that's where they tend to put it on, who have a lot of visceral fat, metabolic syndrome. And the fat just surrounds all the organs and pushes everything out. So when the abdominal canister is so pressurized, it's very hard for the diaphragm to move down. So the diaphragm then stays high up in the thorax. So we don't get the same pressure gradient. You can't use the lungs as a pump to move fluid, number one. So And the high accumulation of visceral fat is a dangerous thing on many levels for, you know, heart health and everything. But other places of overweight, like if someone who's got more weight on their legs, or, you know, the pear shape versus the apple shape, it doesn't really impact their breathing all that much, because it's more the central pressure systems that are impacted by weight, if the fat's around the visceral system. But again, like anything else, the encouragement is eat clean, move well, eat food, not junk, not processed, and drink a lot of water and move, and it'll change, right?
Thank you, Dan.
If I can add to that, from what I've seen in my perspective, is sometimes I find with someone who's overweight, and if they are carrying more weight in the midsection, or say even if they're pregnant and they're not pregnant anymore, sometimes I find that they kind of stuck in inhalation, like that rib cage angle is here, and I need to try to get them to learn how to exhale, so then they can get a little bit more movement on the exhale, which then allows for a better inhale, which then can allow for, like Diane's saying, better, more pumping and movement of the fluid. So sometimes I find, if there is extra weight, if you find that the rib cage angle is more here, that if I can get them to exhale, it's like, okay, now we can get this range of movement better, and we can get more movement there. So that's just my perspective with what I've seen with my clients with regards to weight gain, or someone who's postnatal and the rib cage is still sitting in that more I call it stuck in inhalation kind of phase. There's no term for it, I don't know, but the angle is too big.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
Cool, Trista. Hey, Erin, there's a question here for you, which is, my 11-year-old daughter is going to go on stage for the first time. You mentioned the starfish breath. How do I implement this before her performance?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Well, performers breathing is something that I'm very familiar with. And again, I think it just comes back to introducing the technique that you're wanting to use. So if you resonate with the starfish breathing, that's a nice one. Box breathing is also another thing that works really well before going on stage, which of course is inhale, hold, exhale, hold at whatever rhythm feels right for you, probably as an 11-year-old. But I think the key thing, again, is to practice it several times, as many times as you have time for, before going into that high anxiety situation. Because once your adrenaline starts pumping, it's very hard to then come back to a place of thinking, right, this is what's going to help me. You know, you're already sort of in that reactive mode where you're within the stimulus and you're possibly in fight or flight mode. So yeah, introducing the techniques at home, maybe at bedtime, calm times, or before rehearsals. Rehearsals are there for a reason. So add the breath work, add the breathing in as part of your rehearsal process before performing. And then it will be forever associated with what you do before you go on stage. Before I sing, I also take a few really conscious deep breaths, a couple of short breath holds, just in order to downregulate my system, because that not stage fright necessarily, stage fright's probably a different thing, but the nerves are there to serve you as long as they don't get out of control and become debilitating. If you can channel those nerves into something that allows you to be really focused and really on point, it's a beautiful part of the experience of performing. But the breath is usually the best key to be able to channel those nerves. My singing teacher used to say, take the butterflies in your stomach and put them in fighter jet formation with the breath. So it's a really nice visual way of doing it.
Beautiful.
I hope that helps.
I don't know yeah, thank you, Erin. I was surprised that you have wonderful teachers that have helped you a lot with breathing. And I'm so excited that, you know, you're starting to share your knowledge, because every time we used to share all these wonderful stories about, you know, optimizing your breath. So guys, we're running out, but for everybody that's listening, if you want more from all of the panelists here, I have great news. So we're launching our Breathworks podcast today. You're going to find it live on our YouTube channel. And obviously, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and it's going to come. We're going to add more episodes as we go along. So everybody that you see in the panel has given us an hour of their time, diving deep into the concepts that you sort of heard a preview about from today. So jump into the YouTube channel, and start consuming. We also have a 5-day challenge that Krista has done around functional breathing and around sort of concepts that she spoke about. You'll find that on our YouTube channel as well. So it's a playlist called 5-Day Breathworks Challenge, and it's pretty straightforward. It's about 3 to 7 minutes a day, and it's a great place to start if you're interested. But otherwise, I really appreciate you taking the time. This is our first summit. If you liked it and want us to do more, we'd love to put together more often for you. And I'd like to take a special minute and say thanks to everybody that's joined us from our speakers. So Erin, Johnny, Diane, Trista, Taylor, thank you so much for giving us time and for sharing your knowledge. I really hope that concepts that we spoke about in terms of breathing, in terms of how to optimize it for well-being, performance, the lymph system, different angles that we covered from our children to our own performance, takes more space in our conversations. So we'll sign off there. You'll get an email with all the links to different resources and where you'll find different speakers. If you want to engage with them, please feel free. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thank you for taking the time today. Take care. Hi, guys. You guys are still there.